Okay, so this little tutorial is going to talk about adding text to your Unity project. Maybe make like a little bit of a counter that'll count things up and down. So I'll show you how to put text in there, how to modify the text from code, how to position it, things like that. So we'll create a new Unity project. We will call it text test. How's that? Um, and then this little thing here, this 2D thing is actually a button. It doesn't look like it's a button. There's no, like that looks like a button, that looks like a button. This thing here is slightly odd, but we're just going to use 2D for now. The same stuff works in 3D, but if you click on the actual letters for 2D, you will get a 2D project. So we'll hit create project. I don't need to save that. And let's see here. Here we go. So here's our main camera, and I'm just going to change our background to a white. And we want to add some text, and adding the text in Unity is getting a little bit easier. It used to be slightly complicated. Now it's only a little bit complicated, but we will create UI and text, and that will do a couple things. So we end up with a canvas, which is where all of our graphic stuff is going to go, and we can add buttons and things like that this way too, but we're just going to do text for now. Here's our text, our actual phrase. This is what it says, new text. And then we get an event system that's going to allow us to handle button presses and things like that. But for now, we're just going to look at doing the text. So here's our camera. This is what we see, this area here. And then here's our canvas, this gigantic thing. If I look at our game view, right now we've got new text. We can see that here. Which is what's in this box. And if I change this box to something like newer text, there you go. And a few more things about the font or the text here. We have a font. If you grab like a TTF off of some website or something like that, you put it in your assets folder and then drag it in here. And Unity will package it up and use it when you deploy. So it's really easy to add custom fonts. I think by default you only get Arial, but that's fine for what we're doing right now. It doesn't matter. As far as positioning goes, I am going to. There's a few different ways that you can position stuff on here, and so under the properties of this canvas, I'm going to change some of this stuff to make it make a little bit more sense. So one of the things that's really goofy about the default settings that you get when you bring in a text object and a new canvas is this render mode is screen space overlay. And so I'm going to zoom way out. So here we have this big thing is our canvas. Here's our text right here, which if you look at our game, it's down here in the bottom. It sort of makes sense. But then here's our camera view, way in here. So we have this is our camera view. This is our text space. So yeah, maybe it makes sense to some people. It doesn't make sense to me. But that's okay because we can change it to something that makes a little bit more sense. So this still works. If I go to our game view and click on text, I can position just by changing our Y value here. I can move this thing up and put it wherever I want to put my screen. And this is like an overlay. It's going to be here no matter where we move our camera. It's always going to be on top. So use this thing for menus or HUDs or whatever you're doing. But I'm going to make a couple changes here because this just sort of drives me crazy. Like this is my camera and this is my gigantic canvas. It's hard for me to wrap my head around. I mean, I get it, but it's not necessarily the way that I think. But that's okay. They'll allow me to change it to screen space camera. And so I'm changing the canvas here. It says we're going to put this canvas wherever our camera is. It needs to know what camera is rendering our screen, so I'll just throw this thing, drag this over here from our main scene. And now our main camera and our canvas are the same size. And so now when I'm in scene view and I have this this text object here and I start to position it wherever I want to go, it's matching, and it matches my camera. So there's different ways you can set this thing up. I prefer it this way because this is just how I think. So I went over here and I changed render mode to screen space camera. So it's not the default, but to me it's the way that I think and it's the way that makes the most sense to me. The other thing is the scaler. So here we have constant pixel size. And so basically what that means is if this font here is taking up 10 pixels, it's always going to take up 10 pixels. So if I'm on an iPad 2, it will take up 10 pixels. If I'm on an iPad Air, it's going to take up 10 pixels, and the resolution between the two is doubled, so the text in effect will be half the size when you run on an iPad Air versus running on an iPad. And to me, that's a little bit not what I would really want. I mean, yeah, there's reasons you would want to have that happen, but for what I do, a lot of times that's not what I want. But the cool thing is we can come here and change it. So we can say constant physical size, so it'd be always going to be 2 inches high, or whatever the size is, no matter what your resolution is. Or we can just say scale with screen size, which is what I prefer. So in that case, no matter how we sort of scale, see how the text is getting smaller as I make this a smaller window. And it's always going to scale with whatever screen size we want. And for me, that makes sort of the most sense. And, it's not perfect. And you can see how not only is it scaling, but the position is changing a little bit in relation to the upper left corner. And yeah, so this text stuff, you gotta test it out. If you're gonna deploy to a bunch of devices with a bunch of different resolutions, deploy it to a bunch of devices with a bunch of different resolutions and check it out. Make sure it's doing exactly what you want, because sometimes this auto scaling stuff or positioning and all that kind of stuff doesn't work exactly how you think it will. And maybe it's close enough for whatever you're doing, but sometimes it might make it look a little bit goofy. So if you're using this text stuff, definitely deploy it to your different devices to see how it works. Okay, so this is our text, and we can position it however we need to, wherever we want to put it. But let's go and write just a little bit of code to change this. So I'll put in here. Actually, let me create an empty object, and we will just call it counter. So all we really want to do is count. We're going to change this to a number and just have it count up every second, something like that. And in here we will create a C# script, and we will call it counter. I'll just count. And I will attach this count script to this counter object. And so we need to write a little bit of code, and what we need to know is we need to have a reference to this text object. So when I open up this count script, we need to have a public text, and we'll call it text. Oh, can't have it. So this thing is of type text, but when we try to type it in here, it doesn't know what we're talking about. And the reason is we need to include the UI stuff. So up here we need to say using Unity Engine Unity Engine .ui. And then now when we come in here, we can say public text, and we'll just call it T. And then inside of T, let's just say T.text equals hello. All right, so we're going to get a reference to some text object, and then we'll just set the text to hello, just to make sure that we know what we're doing. If I save that and come back in here with our counter object, now we should have this thing shows up here that we've got a variable called T that's going to be our text, and I can just drag it over from our canvas here and dump it in. And now we say newer text right here, and if I run, it should go to hello. There it goes, it changed. And that's because we assigned this public variable T to this text object here, and then in the code we set it. So let's see, let's make a counter. Let's just make a counter that counts every second, and delete that. And so I will say IEnumerator. We did IEnumerators before with timers, I think. I guess depending on the sequence that you're going through this thing, but basically this allows us to sort of throw something off in the background. They call it a coroutine, and it just runs, on its own schedule. We'll call this seconds counter. Like this, and let's put int seconds equals 0. And inside of our start, we will start this coroutine. So I'll say start coroutine, and we will pass it seconds counter. Okay, so again, this thing, we say start coroutine. The function has to be of type IEnumerator, and that means that this stuff is just going to go off in the background. If you don't really care about coding, don't worry about it. Just remember, if you want something that's going to be on a timer that's going to fire off at different intervals, this is one way to do it. There actually is more ways, but this way I like because this is more flexible and we can use it to do other things. So in here, this thing, we're just going to count forever. We're going to start at 0 and count for as long as our game is running. So we'll say while 1 equals 1, infinite while loop. Everybody will tell you that's bad. In this case, I don't care because we just want to go forever. And we will say yield, return new, wait 4 seconds, and we'll say 1. So this means we're going to wait for 1 second, and then we will say seconds plus plus, and then t.text equals seconds to string. All right, so this is really all that we're going to do. So inside of, when we first show up here, we have our variables, which is our text object and the number of seconds that we've been running. We set the number of seconds that we've been running to 0, start out at 0. Our text object, we set inside the GUI, we dragged it over. As soon as this object starts, we will start a coroutine called seconds counter. Inside of seconds counter, which is of type IEnumerator, we have this infinite while loop, which means go forever. And what this thing is going to do, it's going to go to sleep for 1 second. Then when it wakes up, it's going to increment our seconds counter and then change the text on the screen to represent whatever our current number of seconds is. And if all this goes according to plan and we run it, we should just see this thing count tick up every second. And there it goes. So yeah, this is a way to make a counter if you wanted to have, something counting how long a player was doing something, or you want to start out at 60 seconds and then subtract a tick, every second. You could do that and put it up on the screen so the player knew how much time they had left to do something. And then inside of here is where you would make your decision. Like if it started at 60, you could initialize it to 60, and then this could be a minus minus. And then when seconds is less than or equal to 0, then you could do something else, like go do level over or something like that. So this is a little bit of code, show you how to do a 1 second timer, how to use the canvas object with text so that you can position text and update it through this empty game object with this count code. And that's it for this little tutorial.